Hi, my name is Callie Amon, and here is my environmental humanities reflection on my trip to Iceland. Here's a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today. First, I'm going to pick the experience. Second, I'm going to describe said experience. And third, I'll explain it and how it relates to, or I'll explain how it relates to environmental humanities. So the experience I chose was a social outing with my friends who are pictured on the right. This is Jacob, this is me, and this is James. So a brief explanation is that we decided to go on a hike on a nearby island, so we had to take a bus to a ferry station where the ferry would take us to the island. After we were done hiking around the island, we came back to the mainland and ate KFC for dinner and then walked home. So now here's the experience in detail. Since we had a lot of free time at the beginning of the trip, and my friends and I had no means of working out since there was no gym at the hotel and we had not brought proper running shoes, we were informed that with our city cards, we could hike an island for free. And this sounded like a good idea to us since we wanted to do some sort of challenging physical activity. To get there, we would have to take 2 buses and a ferry. With Google Maps, we could track the bus routes and know which ones we needed to take to get to the ferry that would take us to the island. And this is the 3 of us on the ferry. But at first, I was really nervous to use the public transportation because in Arizona, it's usually unsafe, unreliable, and dirty. But since Iceland doesn't have Ubers, we were forced to take public transportation. I was told that it was free when you have a city card, which I had, but I didn't really know how to use it since I've never had to have a pass for transportation. And this is my rendition of what the public transit looks like in Arizona. But when I got on the bus, it was very straightforward. You just show your city card to the bus driver and he lets you on. I was surprised to see that the buses were clean and on time. And this is a remake image of what the joy I felt when the bus was on time and clean and safe. When we got to the island, we could see the city of Reykjavik from afar. Seeing cities far away in the United States, I usually notice the smog, skyscrapers, and noisiness of crowds. When looking at Reykjavik, I noticed the complete opposite. I saw small houses and buildings of which you would see in a quiet town, not a notable capital city. Here's a juxtaposition of the two. This is what I kind of thought it would look like, and this is kind of what some of the cities in the United States looks like, where this is kind of what it looked like in Reykjavik. Additionally, I could make out which buildings were which from the tour I had taken the day before. The clarity of it really surprised me since I was fairly new to the city. What was the most surprising part of this view was nothing that I saw but what I heard, and that was the sound of the ocean and wind. Earlier in my life, I lived on the East Coast near the ocean. Although in Massachusetts you can make out seagulls and crashing waves, it is still muffled by honking cars and construction noises. Something always seems like it was being torn down or being built. The tranquil scenery brought a sense of calmness that is hard to find in big cities in the United States. And here's a picture of the coast of Reykjavik from the island that we were on. As I hike around the island, I saw various birds that I never really get to see in Arizona, such as seagulls. And if you look closely, there's one right there. Something that I learned about them is that they literally float in the ocean and live on the sides of hills. Before, I hadn't really thought much about what seagulls did all day or where they lived, but now I can say that I do know where they live and what they do, and it's not much. I also noted the wet grass and stony beaches that were very different than other parts of Iceland that I had seen, such as glaciers and volcanoes. Usually around glaciers and volcanoes, the land is very dry and dead where nothing can grow. I found this juxtaposition interesting because it's so different from what I'm familiar with in Arizona. Also, although in the United States we have different climates, but you usually have to travel for hours for the geography to change significantly. Iceland is unique in the way that you can travel 30 minutes and be in a completely different type of terrain. The country might seem very monotone at first, but it is full of surprises once you start to really look. And here's another picture of the island in the very pretty vegetation. When we took the ferry back to the mainland, we waited for our bus to arrive. After waiting for 15 minutes, we decided to get food. We were tired of the seafood, which is the staple of Iceland, and we wanted something that sounded like home, which was KFC. When I walked in, I realized it was very far from the KFC I was used to. They had fewer menu items, with only really serving chicken strips or chicken sandwiches, and the choice between 3 beverages. These choices were much healthier than a classic KFC, as the portion sizes were smaller and the breading was a lot thinner. Although it tasted fresher, as with all Icelandic food in my experience, the seasoning was sparse. It was interesting how something I thought would seem familiar was so different. When the bus still had not arrived, we asked a local person what had happened. They told us that the buses were canceled, probably due to large numbers of people in the streets since it was one of the first days of summer vacation and graduation day for some of the schools nearby. We could tell how much of an inconvenience this was not only to us, but to the many frustrated people accumulating at the bus stop, since many people rely on public transportation due to the small roads and impracticality and expense of having a car in Iceland. And this is a rendition of us asking a stranger for directions. We decided to walk 3 miles back to the hotel instead of waiting for the buses to get up and running again. Although this was unlucky for many, I saw this as a great opportunity to get to know my friends. We talked all the way home about our favorite parts of the trip and the safe environment, constant sunshine, and cleanliness of both the city and air made 3 miles feel like 3 feet. And this is what I would think we looked like walking home. As I reflect further on this experience, I see how it connects to environmental humanities and its values. This excursion was more than just a hike or a workout. It was a lesson in how human lives connect with the environment in meaningful ways. For example, clean and reliable public transportation reduces environmental impact, yet it can cause major inconveniences to many people when it is not operated as planned. In the United States, we have the flexibility and convenience of our own cars, but that comes at a cost to the environment. And this is a picture of me on a bus. Another big contrast was the lack of construction in Iceland. When compared to America, Icelanders appreciate the beauty of their natural environment and are willing to sacrifice convenience to preserve nature. In the United States, as soon as something becomes obsolete or outdated, we tear it down and start over. Again, that brings its own cost in terms of loss of beauty and history. It made me think of the open desert around me in North Scottsdale and how quickly it becomes filled with new buildings and houses. Icelanders live in close harmony with their surroundings, more than I'm used to in the United States. The calmness I felt came not only from nature, but from a society that respects and preserves it. Even the fast food meal at KFC reflected a culture that isn't always interested in more. Things overall were much more expensive than in the US, but that isn't always a bad thing. When something costs more, you have to consider whether or not it's worth the price. Overall, this day made me think about how we shape our environment, but our environment also shapes us. What we choose to focus on grows. We have a choice what we invest our time and energy into, and I'm really glad I chose Iceland for my summer trip. I got to see how another culture lives, and I have new appreciation for how respecting the land and designing our lives in harmony with it can lead to a different life. Thank you for listening.